Thank you, Senator. You're good to go.
All right, and when we're ready, I guess we need to, Hobie, take the roll?
Yes, sir. Whenever you're ready.
Shoot.
All right, Delegate King.
I'm present.
Delegate Converse Fowler.
Present.
Delegate Askew.
Present.
Delegate Hodges.
Here.
Delegate Ransom.
Present.
Senator Locke.
Here.
Senator Kagan.
Here.
Senator Lewis.
Here.
Andrea McClellan.
Here.
Chris Stone.
Here.
And Delegate Joseph Bouchard.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, great. So welcome aboard, everybody. We've got some new members, new faces, and this is our organizational sort of meeting, and then we're going to get the tour of the horizon from the administration on several points, and Councilwoman McClellan's going to have a presentation for us as well. This is for those of you who are new to the committee. We do some good work here. Obviously, an important topic for those of us in the coastal Virginia and Hampton Roads, and I know certainly two of our new members, Councilwoman McClellan and former Delegate Bouchard, have done a lot of work outside the assembly on these issues, and so they're going to be a really positive addition for us, and look forward to working with everybody. Full disclosure, I hate Zoom, and so as soon as I can figure out a way for us to safely meet with CDC guidelines in a real place and in person, I'm going to do that, and so we'll work on that between now and the next meeting. Organizationally, I am told that the chairman spot is not vacant because it's not. So unless anybody has a contrary nomination, I intend or would like to stay as chair. So if there are any nominations for a new chair, you can try and unmute, but you probably won't be able to. You can make them now. Otherwise, we'll move on to vice chair. All right, hearing none, we'll go to vice chair because that is in fact empty. Delegate Hodges has served long and hard in that position, but I'm told it is listed as vacant. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Locke.
I would like to nominate Delegate Hodges.
Mr. Chairman, I second that nomination.
We have a motion and a second that Delegate Hodges be appointed vice chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Delegate King.
Sure. First, just a discussion on the motion before acting on it, and there may be other nominations, but I wanted to just have a better understanding because I've been on this commission since the beginning back in 2014, and I just want to remember where we are procedurally. If I recall, most committees like this, not that there is a hard and fast rule or precedent established anywhere in writing as far as I know, but just as a pure matter of convention, we've alternated between the Senate and House as far as the nominal leadership, if you will, a chair, vice chair, et cetera. And we've also tried our best to make it a bipartisan effort, one Republican, one Democrat, whether it's a House or Senate. And I don't remember exactly where we are in the status here. So if you're saying that the vice chair spot is open today, but the chair is not, is that because one person's term expired? I'm just not sure how that happened.
I think you have to check. I think Delegate King, you'd have to check with the Speaker's office on that.
Oh, okay.
Hobie, am I right? Hobie?
Sure, yeah.
Don't be shy, Hobie.
I will go with whatever you all are doing. My experiences, I've seen both. I mean, I've staff commissions where it switched every year. I've staff commissions where it didn't. If that helps.
I think Delegate King's question was how come there was a vacancy on the vice chair?
Yeah, just further question, Mr. Chair. I guess my question was, number one, it just seemed somewhat odd that if we're going to elect chair and vice chair, we normally would do it at the same time as opposed to just having one. because one's term doesn't expire in time. I'm not sure how that works, but that's beyond that. The other thing is, to the extent that we want to have some level of balance, whether it's one Senate, one House, one Republican, one Democrat, is that something that's set in stone or written anywhere, or a precedent of this committee? Because I know that we have some new members, and I've certainly enjoyed working with Delegate Hodges and my colleagues, but we do have some new members. I just wanted, before we close the nomination, I just wanted to see if there's any kind of a rule that we need to be aware of, and then if there anybody else that's interested, just to give everybody a chance to step up. I for one, I'm not stepping up myself, so just want to make sure I clear that.
Well, I mean, we're open for nominations, so we've got one on the floor.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Delegate Fowler.
Yes, so nominations, and those are taken from, can you nominate yourself? Because I am interested if anyone wanted to put that nomination forth. I have had some conversations. It's something that I would love to help lead and support your leadership as chair. So I'm not sure if that's something I can do, or if any of my colleagues would be open.
Mr. Chair.
You're talking,
Delegate
your lips are moving, but you're not saying anything.
I'm sorry, if I may, there you go. Hit it twice. If I may, Mr. Chairman, we had been in the past running as co-chairs. I don't think there was anything in the statute as far as a chair and a vice chair, if I recall, and which allowed us to serve as a chair, to serve as co-chairs and to work together. And that's what the precedence has been in the past.
But I think and it's names don't mean anything to me, but I think we found out in the resolution, and somebody, Scott, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that it is actually chair and vice chair. Scott, Hobie, somebody.
If I may, when this group first started, the chair and vice chair was based upon the fact that the individuals who carried the legislation was myself and Delegate Stolley. The leadership was based upon the fact that we both carried the legislation. And therefore, the leadership was determined that way simply because we carried the legislation. He was elected as the chair. I was elected as the vice chair. And then I think he was the chair. I don't know how long. And then when he rotated off as chair, I think that's when you became the chair, Lynn.
That's right. Yeah.
It went from the Senate to the House. From the House to the Senate. And then that's when a delegate became the vice chair. And that's when Delegate Hodges became the vice chair.
Yeah.
And that's how the rotation kind of began, because I had no interest in being chair.
That's right. You had a full plate. Yeah.
Right.
And Keith, we call it, officially it says vice chair. You and I treated it as co-chairs, and we didn't realize that until getting geared up for this, that it's actually called vice chair. So that's why we just call it.
Well, with the nomination on the floor, Mr. Chairman, I would accept the nomination.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Askew.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Delegate Fowler for vice chair.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I would second that motion. And speaking to the motion, I'm trying to make sure that whatever we do now sets a precedent, and that we don't necessarily violate any things that we've done in the past. Now, I understand that the concept of precedent in this day and age is less meaningful than we would all like, given what's going on across the river. But I think that to the extent that we can have a chair and a vice chair, one from each chamber, I think that is a very good precedent for us to maintain, because it clearly shows that we're cooperating. To the extent that there is a political partisanship balance, I know on other committees I serve on, that's always been not a written rule or a tradition. It's certainly something that we all try to strive to the extent that we can be bipartisan. Having said that, I also don't want to miss out on the opportunity for people that want to serve, new members that want to serve, to at least express their interest and such. And so because Delegate Fowler is new to this commission, and my friend Keith Hodges has been on this commission with me for a while, I want to at least for us to have this conversation so we can hear from maybe both the delegates who are interested, just maybe a little bit from them as to what they're interested in doing as vice chair. And then that way we can open up to the election, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. The reason why I want to second that is I didn't want this to look like we're just kind of rushing through this election without having a robust conversation, given that it is a new time and we do have some new members. So if that's okay, maybe we can just hear from Delegate Hodges and from Delegate Fowler, just maybe a sentence or two, and then we can maybe proceed to an election.
Sure.
Unless there are other members that want to step up as well.
Sure. And again, let me point out that the reason we're even having this discussion, well, of course, it's always appropriate to review leadership positions, but I mean, on the House side, this showed up as vacant. So I don't know where that came from on the Speaker's office or where, but that's how it shows up. And so that's why we're even having this exercise, because Keith has served as vice chair / co-chair for quite some time. So, but anyway, sure. Let's hear from Delegate Hodges. You want to lead off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my record speaks for itself as far as dealing with flooding issues over the years. Very passionate about it, working long and hard on a number of issues, and typically probably have carried more pieces of legislation than anyone in the history of the House dealing with flooding.
There's absolutely no doubt.
And getting some great work done. And I think the participation is on this commission and then serving as vice chair to help lead the efforts forward. And with the administration, I think we'll hear some. I don't think it's any of my bills on Dr. Phillips, but some of the efforts to coordinate between the agencies and the governor's office to work with flooding. There was a very, very good bill this past session. So I just think the record speaks for itself, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Delegate Fowler.
Okay, thank you so much for the nomination and the opportunity. I think that one of the biggest things I just want to bring up is what I would want to do moving forward and how I would want to support the committee. I think we have the capability of doing so much, and I think my education background is extremely helpful in trying to put together those pieces and to kind of talk about moving forward how we utilize our resources, what we have in place. I've already been having these conversations with the stakeholders. I think they want to be able possible. And I think one of the things would be kind of getting a good overview of what's there. I've had the conversation about the agenda and working. I think it's hard to really judge a record because, when there has been, when we were in the minority, things weren't gonna get through. There's been a lot of good flood legislation. And I think it's time for, just a new look at things. And I'm here to support the committee. I've been putting in the work even before this meeting to try and make sure I understood everything that was going to be put forward and what we were going to be able to discuss. So I look forward to working with the committee, and I hope I can earn your vote.
Okay, anybody else want to be heard? We've got 2 nominations up there for vice chair, Delegate Hodges, Delegate Fowler. All right. How do you want to approach this?
I would say we can do it however you want. In the past, I think we've nominated one, voted, but if you would like to vote on both at the same time, I think that's okay. Either way, I think is okay.
Okay. Well, we had Keith up first. Why don't we just vote one at a time? Does that make sense?
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? Everybody cool? Okay. All right. So before us right now is Delegate Hodges for vice chair of the committee. Do we need to call roll? I guess how do you do that on this absurd Zoom thing?
Sort of just like roll call. I'll just go down the list and
All right.
Yays and nays. Delegate Keem.
Delegate Keem abstains on this one.
Okay. Delegate Fowler.
I'm sorry, was the vote on each person? I'm voting for myself, but I don't know what you were asking.
We're doing Keith. Yeah, we're taking one at a time.
So I would say, we're doing one at a time. Okay, so I guess I should abstain because it's mine. I'm sorry, who can answer that question for me? I'm not sure if
I will say, and previously I've had members vote for themselves in commissions.
I guess I can vote no, so I would vote no.
Okay.
Okay.
Delegate Askew.
No.
Delegate Hodges.
Guess I have to vote for myself. Aye.
Delegate Ranson.
Aye.
Senator Locke.
Aye.
Senator Kiggins.
Aye.
Senator Lewis.
Aye.
Andrea McClellan.
No.
Chris Stone.
No.
And Delegate Bouchard.
No.
Five ayes, 5 nays, and 1 abstention. I'm
What?
sorry, 2 abstentions.
Mr. Chair, I'm new to the committee here, so my apologies. I don't understand perhaps the rules, but abstentions are based on what is the ruling of why you could abstain on a vote?
We never ask.
I never asked.
We, we have those. We actually have some of those rules at the council level. So
where we have a tie vote?
Yes, sir. 5-5 with one abstention.
Okay. You know what we're going to do? We're not going to waste any more time on this. All right. We'll take this up at the next meeting. The thing will stay open. And then we'll go on and take care of business today. Maybe Delegate Fowler and Delegate Hodges can chat in the interim, whatever. But let's not spend.
Yeah, I just have a point like a parliamentary inquiry.
Sure.
So that was the vote, Ms. Chair, on Delegate Hodges, correct? And that was a yes or no, but there's been no vote taken on my nomination. Am I correct?
That's correct. You want to go ahead then? Doesn't make any difference to me. Let's get it done. Come on, we got stuff to take care of.
Mr. Chair, that's fine with me if that works for you.
All right, y'all want to vote? Let's vote. Go ahead.
Delegate King.
For the same reason, I'm going to abstain on this one too.
Delegate Fowler.
I vote aye.
Delegate Askew.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Ranson.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, and I'm new on this committee. We are taking away the bipartisan purpose of passing legislation, continuing on with this vote. I'm very concerned about that. I think that, and I didn't even know that this was happening today. I came on to begin working on bills and moving forward with very meaningful proposals. And I didn't even know that this vote was happening today. So I'm a little bit concerned that we're even moving forward. I don't know what, the purpose of this vote. I didn't even know that this was going on.
I hear you.
I would like to know a little more about why this vice chair position is even up. So
we're in the middle of a vote here.
I think all those concerns have been raised. So let's keep going.
Next is Delegate Hodges.
Keith, you muted.
No.
Delegate Ranson.
No.
Senator Locke.
No.
Senator Kiggins.
No.
Senator Lewis.
No.
Andrea McClellan.
yes.
Chris Stone.
Yes.
And Delegate Bouchard.
Yes.
5 ayes, 5 nays, 1 abstention.
Surprise. Okay. Councilwoman McClellan, welcome aboard. You've got a little presentation for us, I believe, on Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Coastal Resiliency.
Yes, and to Delegate Ranson's point, I agree. I'm excited to get some real work done here. So let's get into the meat of things. I appreciate that. And so for those whom I do not know, I'm Andrea McClellan. I serve on the Norfolk City Council. I also serve as the chair of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission's Coastal Resilience Subcommittee. That committee is a little less than 2 years old. I believe it's the first committee of elected officials at the regional level discussing the issues of flooding. We have taken it upon ourselves to discuss what we will be bringing to the full Hampton Roads Planning District Commission body in October, a slate of legislative ideas, which we hope to get their buy-in, and we wanted to have the opportunity to share them, preview those with you today. They do not have the full support yet because we haven't had the opportunity to address these of that regional body of 17 member municipalities. But without further ado, and I would love to get feedback. This is really sort of an opportunity for brainstorming. And just as a reference point, the members of that subcommittee include elected officials from the vice chair is the mayor of Hampton, Donnie Tuck. We have representation from Portsmouth, Newport News, Virginia Beach, of course, Norfolk, and Hampton. So it's a nice representation of the Hampton Roads region. We invite our state electeds to attend as well, and we've seen Delegate Fowler there, I think, for every meeting. So we appreciate her representation as well as others who have been there for a variety, many of whom are here, so thank you. And we also have in attendance our federal delegation too. The 4 areas that we are presenting to the body in October include, the first is a pretty big idea. And so I'm curious to see what your reaction is. And that is the idea of creating a Commonwealth Flood Board. Thinking through what the Commonwealth Transportation Board does and how it functions, we would like to propose the idea of an overarching board that would be responsible for funding, legislation, et cetera. It would have to be a newly created entity that would have a director and would have engineering and planning staff, budgetary staff, would include, among other things, perhaps look at RGGI funding, how that is spent, as well as all the other grant funding that's coming through the various secretariats there. We have a white paper on that and how we've suggested it be comprised and how it's staffed and how it's paid for. But that idea, which would, and you notice that we didn't say Commonwealth Resilience Board. We specifically looked at flooding because we think flooding is more specific and resilience could get into a lot of different areas. But as we all know, flooding is no longer just a coastal issue. It is an issue that we're seeing in whether it's Nelson County or Danville or Roanoke or Alexandria or Chesterfield, of course, the shore, the peninsula, et cetera. So that is our first idea. The second issue is the idea of legislation that would have the state create and fund new precipitation data. So precipitation data, of course, flooding comes from both tidal as well as precipitation. And right now, as you probably know, the state utilizes precipitation data from NOAA, the federal agency, and that data was last updated in 2006. It's something called the Atlas 14 data set. And so there's an opportunity with a cost share for Virginia to participate to have that updated. And so we would recommend that be updated as well as to the extent possible. Yes. Was there a question?
Your connection, you're breaking up and coming in and out on me. I don't know if it's your connection or it's on my end. Is anybody else having that problem?
It's probably is it my connection? No? Okay.
All right. You're back.
You need better broadband, Senator.
I know, right?
We could talk about that too. At any rate, so precipitation data, having that updated. So that's number 2. The third would be to introduce the idea of flooding in the smart scale determination. As these large transportation projects are being considered, can we have some element of flooding included as well? And then the fourth item is the idea of a requirement for flood claim disclosure. So not a requirement that you're in a floodplain, because we feel like that information is widely available and can be out there. In the Hampton Roads region and in Norfolk in particular, we have a lot of flood claims. I have a situation where a constituent who lives actually a few blocks from me purchased a house in 2016. They had their first flood event in 2017. They knew that they had to have flood insurance. That wasn't a problem. What they didn't know was that there had been 3 previous flood claims prior to the purchase, and that information wasn't disclosed at the time of the sale. And so they went from being a repetitive loss property to a severe repetitive loss property, and their flood insurance went up exponentially. So we feel like if you can get a Carfax when you purchase a used car, you should be able to get a flood fax when you purchase a home. That is disclosure that happens now in Texas. It happens in Louisiana. It happens in Maryland. I believe it happens to some extent in North Carolina. There are some great resources out there. The Virginia, the William & Mary Coastal Policy Center has put together a great research paper within the last couple of months with various disclosure ideas, but we feel strongly that that disclosure should happen. It's actually happening. If you go to realtor.com, they are actually providing a lot of that information now already. So we feel like Virginia, while we are a buyer beware state, there are some things that you have to disclose currently, and we think flooding needs to be included in that. So those are the 4 ideas: the Coastal Flood Board, the Commonwealth Flood Board, including flooding in smart scale, updated precipitation, and flood claim disclosure. Great. I'm happy to take questions, or I would love your feedback and comments that I can bring to our regional body as well.
You said your next meeting is in October?
Yes, sir. I think it's October 15th or 16th.
Okay, that might be helpful for some of us to know. And can anybody Zoom in?
Well, I know how much you like Zoom, Senator, so yes, we would love to have you Zoom in. But yes, it will be virtual. I believe we actually utilize WebEx instead of Zoom, but yes, it will be a virtual meeting, and we'd welcome your attendance, and we can get you some additional information to this.
Mr. Chairman, the meeting actually is set up for 12:30 on Thursday, the 15th of October.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Fowler.
I just had a question. Councilwoman McClellan, aren't those meetings also, I've been a part of them, so I know what was in them, but aren't they also the videos, aren't they available if anybody needed to catch up? The agendas and the minutes and the video, the regional efforts are great, and I think we need to continue that, especially in this committee. Our focus needs to, really work on that regional if we're going to get some things done. So I think they are, and I think she's nodding. So I just wanted to point out they are there.
Yeah, they are. So this is the October 15th meeting will actually be the full Hampton Roads Regional Planning District Commission versus the subcommittee. But certainly, as I mentioned, flooding is an issue that extends far beyond Hampton Roads. And what I hope out of this committee, which I know we've had a bit of a coastal perspective, is I really do feel like we need to get the buy-in statewide throughout the Commonwealth of your peers to ideally to get legislation and most importantly funding to help to address some of these issues. So we're trying to take, while we are starting regionally, we're doing it with the mindset that this is something that affects Commonwealth-wide issues.
All right, you all do great work there. I've sat in on one of those meetings, I think, and good to have you all focused on that. Any other questions for Councilwoman McClellan?
I would just, for Councilwoman McClellan, there is a scheduled meeting of the Resilience Subcommittee on October the 6th at 10 a.m.
That's true, Chris. Thank you. And what we are looking to do is putting together a series of white papers on each of these 4 issues, where we'll be talking about those on October 6th. My hope was that I could bring back from this discussion today some additional feedback from all of you esteemed state legislators to bring back to the committee, because we don't want to put in so much work and then everybody says absolutely not, this is a ridiculous idea. We recognize that a lot of this is going to take work, and sometimes these big ideas take multiple years to get through, and that's fine, but we'd love to have some guidance from you all in terms of ideas and feedback.
Well, I certainly think you all are on the right track, particularly with the statewide flooding board. And would hope you guys could help us out by fleshing it out in those white papers as we get closer to January, and then see what we can do legislatively. And I'm sure other ideas will percolate up from our hearings over the next several weeks. But anyway, any other questions for Councilwoman McClellan? All right, before we move on to the rest of the agenda, I neglected at the outset to have everybody introduce themselves. So why don't we go round and round here and everybody tell us who you are.
Senator, maybe you should call on people.
I think I'm going to have to. I was going to get Hobie to call the roll, but all
right. I can do that if you'd like.
Delegate King. Easier. Go ahead, Hobie.
Delegate King.
Do I need to abstain again? Just kidding. I'm Mark Keem. I'm up in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County, and I've been honored to be on this commission since the very beginning in 2014, I believe, and it was renewed a couple times. I've had the pleasure of serving with many of you in different capacities, and it's good to see some of the new members, like my good friend Councilwoman Andrea McClellan, and I see a former delegate and Chris as well. Thank you for joining us. I think one of the keys of this issue, this commission and this issue, is to broaden the conversation beyond the obvious coastal places. I know that most of you are from Hampton Roads area, which makes sense in terms of how people visualize this issue, but this flooding is an issue that affects every part of the Commonwealth, every part of our nation, and it's not just the coastal places that are at risk. Obviously, your area is more at risk than places that are a little bit more upland and in rural areas, but flooding as a problem is, as part of the climate change, is something that affects all of us. And so I want to make sure that we're constantly thinking about and talking about this issue as a statewide and a nationwide and a global problem. So me serving not in your area maybe is one way for me to make sure that I remind you all that that is how we should be looking at this issue. Thank you.
Delegate Fowler.
Thank you. I'm Delegate Converse Fowler, go by Delegate Fowler. I am new to the committee also, but been in attendance for most meetings since I was able to. I've done a lot of things to try and work on flooding here, so I'm really grateful to be on the committee, to be able to make change. We've done flooding roundtables here locally, bringing stakeholders together, working on legislation. Member of the Flood Coalition, gotten our locality involved in being part of the American Flood Coalition, and just ready to get to work and ready to do some things. Part of my district is one of those in the area that's hit the hardest with flooding, but I am in real estate, and I can say that flooding is something that affects everyone across the state in different ways, just depending on where you are, how your house is built, just depends on the local ordinances and just a lot of things. So it's a big cumulative picture that we are here to look at, and I hope to bring that to the table, and I appreciate all your everyone's work on this committee. Thank you so much.
Delegate Askew.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Delegate Alex Askew. I represent the 85th District in Virginia Beach. I'm excited to join many other stakeholders that I've worked on many other issues with. So I'm excited to be here with Mr. Chair and the rest of the members, and I'm excited to get to work.
Glad to have you.
Delegate Hodges.
Good morning. Keith Hodges, 98th District, which is Virginia's Middle Peninsula, 1,000 miles of shoreline, water. Basically, it's our life here. Not only drives our economy, but it's also something that we have to deal with, and as far as flooding. And we have to look at things in different ways in order to solve these problems that we're dealing with, and look forward to working with everyone on this commission.
Delegate Ranson.
Hi, everyone. Margaret Ranson. I'm the 99th District. I hug the entire shoreline. So I have Lancaster, Northumberland, Westmoreland County, King George, Richmond County, and a portion of Caroline. So just like Delegate Hodges and many of you all have a lot of rural territory, and flooding is an issue. We are a low-lying area. You can see behind me, I have a strong north wind today, and that just pushes the water into our land. So with the low-lying area, the water pushes onto our ditches. So that's a huge issue also for our roads. And so I look forward to working with the committee and coming up with some ideas moving forward. So thanks.
Senator Locke.
Good morning. I'm Mamie Locke, and I represent the 2nd Senate District. I live in Hampton, which is part of the impetus for becoming involved from the very, very beginning. As I mentioned earlier on, Delegate Stolle and I are the ones who put forth the legislation several years ago that initiated this entire study that began with looking at, I call it sea level rise, other people call it other things. But eventually this group came to be called coastal flooding. But we felt that it was very important to begin a whole process of examining why it is that we're having these problems and it's not just impacting our region, but the impact that it has on the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, because ultimately we all have to pay for it in one way or the other. So with that, I'm still here as a part of this group because I'm concerned as living here in the city of Hampton and here in Hampton Roads for all of us to come together collectively to work out these issues and determine what we can do to address the problems. Thank you.
Senator Kiggins.
Hi, good morning. I'm also new to the committee. I'm Senator Jen Kiggins. I represent the 7th Senatorial District here, which is the majority of Virginia Beach and parts of Norfolk. And I'm excited to be on this committee just because I heard many times throughout the campaign, and I see the issues with flooding in my neighborhoods and just driving, throughout Virginia Beach and Norfolk. We live on the Chesapeake Bay here in my district, and we have Virginia beaches, which are all of those things are important to tourism and just our quality of life here, enjoying the waterways. So I'm and plus we also have the military in our bases here, which are also impacted by sea level rise. So these are things that are important to me, and I continue to hear from constituents who struggle with flooding issues, especially after some of the torrential rains we had last week. We saw it. We heard from people who were, asking questions about what's next for improving the flooding situation. So I'm excited to be a part of this group and to learn more about what our options are and to work together in a bipartisan way just to get some things done to improve coastal flooding. Thank you.
Andrea McClellan.
Good morning. You already heard me. I would just add that I represent 125,000 Virginians in my role in Norfolk City Council as a super ward representative. And prior to coming on council in 2016, I served on the planning commission for 3 years. So land use is a big issue for me as well. Norfolk, as you know, is home to the largest naval base in the world. And when we can't get 40 or 50,000 sailors on and off a base because of flooded roads, it's a matter of national security. When the second busiest port on the East Coast, also home base in Norfolk, can't get our trucks on and off that port, folks in Southwest Virginia can't get product on their shelves at grocery stores and Target. It's a matter of economic security for the Commonwealth. So our flooding is an issue, I think, for the entire state. And I think what I hear consistently is we all know that this is a Commonwealth-wide issue. And I look forward to working with you in this committee to start to address it in that capacity. And I'm really honored to be with each of you and look forward to getting some real work done, Delegate Ransone. I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Chris Stone.
Good morning. My name is Chris Stone. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I'm also the senior principal at Clark Nixon. We are a full service architecture engineering firm with over 450 employees. We are headquartered in Virginia Beach at Town Center. And this year, we're actually celebrating our 100-year anniversary in business. We were actually founded in 1920 in Lynchburg. Over the years, I've been collaborating with many of you. Councilwoman McClellan, I see Rear Admiral Phillips is on the line. I've been collaborating with her as well on issues of flooding and sea level rise. And I really look forward to working with all of you to get some great legislation through, hopefully in the next couple of years, that can help us deal with flooding and sea level rise issues in our communities.
Delegate Bouchard.
Hey, Joe, you're muted.
Okay. I am currently a self-employed all hazards emergency planning consultant, covering everything from terrorism to hurricanes. And flooding is always a concern for my clients. I got involved in sea level rise adaptation and resilience while I was commanding officer of Naval Station Norfolk. And we had serious problems. Those problems are even more serious today. We invested about $25 million in adaptation while I was CO. I have been involved in this topic ever since. I won't recount everything. Except one episode. I was a consultant to a foundation and helped this region win $2 million in grants for adaptation work. That was in 2015. With my Navy background and having commanded a base in the region, I think I can be of great assistance when issues related to DOD or bases come up. Thank you.
And Senator Lewis.
Senator Linwood Lewis represents the 6th Senate District, 2 counties on Virginia's Eastern Shore, half the city of Norfolk, 1 precinct in Virginia Beach, and Matthews County on the Middle Peninsula. So at the pointed edge of sea level rise all throughout my district and everyone I represent. So obviously it's been an important issue for me. Excited to work again with this committee. We've done some good work here. We've got the Community Flood Preparedness Fund coming up online here shortly. We've got auctions from Reggie coming up in January, I believe. And so one of the things I think we can do uniquely as a committee going forward is in the nascent stages of this Flood Preparedness Fund is we can sort of act like a little oversight committee and keep our finger on the pulse of how that's operating and how we can tweak it and fine tune it and make sure that works, among other legislative endeavors that I'm sure we'll have ready by the time January comes around for the General Assembly session. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for your interest. So, all right. I think with that, we're ready to start the program. Ann, are you there?
I am, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. You're on deck.
Okay. I believe they're going to let me share my screen.
Oh, we've lost you.
The coordinator is going to let me share my screen. We're waiting for that.
That's correct. If you, in the lower center, if you click on share screen, and then you can click your document.
Okay. Here we go. And let me go to full screen.
Oh, good. Great.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Chairman Lewis, members of the Joint Subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you this morning. Congratulations to the new members. Thank you all for your willingness to serve and your willingness to take action on this very important issue for this committee. And the issue, of course, is for the future of the Commonwealth and its coastal regions. I'm Ann Phillips. I'm the Special Assistant for Coastal Adaptation and Protection. I report to Governor Northam through Secretary of Resources Matthew Strickler, who sends his respects this morning. He is overseeing and chairing the Conservation Cabinet, which is meeting at exactly the same time. I've been asked to give you an update on 3 specific pieces of legislation that were passed during the 2020 General Assembly this morning, and I will do that here most urgently. But first, I would like to make sure you're aware that joining us from those agencies, we have Commissioner Stephen Bowman and Mr. Anthony Watkinson from VMRC, Mr. Russell Baxter from the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and Ms. Jutta Schneider from the Department of Environmental Quality. The pieces of legislation that we will talk to you about this morning and the activities that have taken place since they were passed in the 2020 General Assembly are shown here. First, Senate Bill 1027/House Bill 981, which is the Clean Energy and Community Flood Preparedness Act. It's been mentioned several times already in the conversation this morning. This authorizes Virginia to join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We'll be the 11th state to do so. Continues the Shoreline Resilience Fund as the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, and authorizes revenues from RGGI auction carbon allowances to be distributed to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund and also to the Department of Housing and Community Development for low-income energy efficiency programs. The second piece of legislation, Senate Bill 776, Virginia Natural Coastal Protection Act, overseen by VMRC, directs VMRC to promulgate and update minimum standards and guidelines for protection and conservation of wetlands, and to approve only living shoreline approaches to shoreline stabilization unless the best available science shows that such approaches are not suitable. Finally, House Bill 504, Chesapeake Bay Preservation Areas. This adds to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, preservation of mature trees or planting of trees as a water quality protection tool. and as a means of other natural resource benefits. And specific to my area, coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise and climate change be considered in the list of activities that State Water Control Board is directed to encourage and promote as it adopts criteria for local governments. So I've also been asked if there are additional legislative requirements foreseen for any of these pieces of legislation, and at present for all three, that is not the case. However, things can come up as we work through the fall. So starting with RGGI and Senate Bill 1027, House Bill 981, a quick update on the RGGI timeline. Some of this we spoke to already in the meeting this morning. DEQ is directed by the legislation to implement regulations, and they have done so by July 2020. Again, Virginia becomes a full participant January 1st of 2021, and we expect the first auction to take place roughly March, April timeframe. The specific date is to be determined. Shortly after that first auction, within a few days, we will receive revenues from the outcomes of that auction, and those revenues will be deposited into, as directed by the Clean Energy and Community Flood Preparedness Act, both the Community Flood Preparedness Fund and into fund sponsored by DHCD that will look at low-income energy efficiency programs. So 50% of the revenues, as you see on the slide, will go to DHCD, 45% to the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund, administered by Department of Conservation and Recreation and the Virginia Resources Authority. And specific to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, 25% of this money spent annually is to go to projects in low-income geographic areas, which are defined in the legislation as being locality or a community within a locality that has a median household income of not greater than 80% of the local median household income, or any area designated in the Commonwealth as a qualified opportunity zone by the Secretary of the Treasury. So that is a unique circumstance specific to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. In addition, 5% of the funds go to administrative costs and to carry out statewide climate change planning and mitigation activities. That second quote is specifically, while the fund can be used for that in general, 3% of the money goes to DEQ to help oversee their RGGI responsibilities, and 2% goes to DHCD and DMME to oversee and implement the programs that they are responsible for. I'd also like to add a few more comments from the Department of Conservation and Recreation on this slide, specific to their administration of the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. As you're aware, they've operated a grant program to address community flooding preparedness and prevention for years, known as the Virginia Dam Safety, Flood Prevention, and Protection Assistance Fund. They have an MOU with VRA to help them manage these funds, and they anticipate doing a similar kind of MOU to help manage this new fund, which is different. The two are not the same. They will not be managed or handled the same way, although there are some things that might be common interests. Certainly the new Community Flood Preparedness Fund is more expansive, and it's also available not only to localities, but also to other political subdivisions of the Commonwealth. Because of language that's been incorporated into the legislation, DCR and VRA can continue the kind of relationship that they already have, which is good, because it will help smooth the way as we work through how we will set up the criteria for this fund and how it will be administered. And of note, it is a statewide fund. This is for community flood preparedness, statewide, not just coastal. DCR is in the earliest phases, preliminary phases of developing draft guidelines for this fund. And then in concert with the governor's office, with me, Secretary of Natural Resources, we will work through a robust public comment period before any guidelines are adopted and promulgated. We also expect to be ready to do that. And of course, DHCD is going through the same kind of preparatory processes right now and working through how they will accept public comment for their piece. But we will be ready to issue guidelines, and once we have received the first set of funds and know how much money is in that for initial auction for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund in March of 2021. So that is the timeline. We will be prepared once we get to that point, and we'll be able to issue grant guidelines once we see how much money is available, which will help decide how and what exactly we want to focus on. I also should emphasize here, this is a revolving loan fund and a grant fund. So both kinds of financial opportunities are available in the context of this fund. We also will be working to align this fund with not only the Coastal Master Plan framework, but other grant and loan funds at the federal and state level, so that we can get as much synergy as possible out of this effort. Next, Senate, sorry, I'm getting very touchy on my mouse. There you go. Senate Bill 776, Virginia Marine Resources.
Chair, I apologize. Would you like to hold questions to the end, or should we take each legislation?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Councilwoman McClellan, why don't we just let her run through and then.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Happy to do it either way, Senator Lewis. Thank you. Virginia Natural Coastal Protection Act. Virginia Marine Resources Commission is responsible for this legislation. In implementing the direction of the legislation, the modifications to it, they have already sent a memorandum to all wetlands boards, making them aware of the legislation and the guidelines, and have begun a series of public workshops to solicit input to the wetland guidelines to address living shorelines in particular. These have all been done virtually, not a surprise. The first workshop, just so you're aware, was entitled Listening to Local Regulators. We had about 95 people or so participate. Comments centered on defining the best available science, factors for siting living shorelines, and managing Chesapeake Bay Protection Act in conjunction with tidal wetlands management. And in that context, VMRC and DEQ were working together, and we'll talk about the DEQ's legislation, House Bill 504, in the next slide. But they are working together and collaborating, even though they are executing different processes, and we'll talk about that as well. The second workshop, which was just held September 9th by VMRC, talked about minimum standards for use and development of tidal wetlands, and then also talked about policies for managing sea level rise and climate change over the long term. About 75 people attended that. I participated in that session as well. And again, questions and discussions centered on all kinds of on-site physical parameters and a lot of engineering questions, with a consistent theme from wetlands board members asking about, whose science is the best science, and who should we rely on? What entity can help us? And of course, VIMS is a part of this, and they are advising VMRC in this context, and we're certainly a part of that webinar as well. So, but what we're getting from this is picking up some recurring themes, and also, I would say, very strong participation from across a wide variety of stakeholders, including individuals and community members. This is open to everyone. So the third workshop is scheduled for September 30th, and will focus on input for best management practices and preferred shoreline management. So again, they are public. They can be found on the VMRC's website, and all are welcome to attend. Eventually, the full commission will have to reconsider revisions to the wetlands guidelines at a future public hearing that is not yet scheduled. And the wetlands boards have also been advised of this requirement, such that they can, in particular, if a living shoreline is not suitable, that they can, what kinds of things they can use as reasons for that, to make that determination, and then what kinds of aspects of natural and nature-based features can they incorporate into the design that they approve, which is also in the legislation. So moving forward there, also available, and this has been promulgated at both public sessions, and of course is a part of the education that VMRC and VIMS do anyway. VIMS Office of Research and Advisory Services is available to help in this, and and as I've mentioned, we're coordinating with across DEQ, DCR, and VMRC to not only educate, but also collect and receive input on this as we move forward. So again, no additional legislation. We're not aware of any need for additional legislation related to this bill at present. However, things do change. Finally, House Bill 504, which, as discussed, adds the top two criteria related to preservation of mature trees and coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise to the criteria that local governments and the State Water Conservation Board will consider in determining and implementing regulations. Because of the way the legislation is written, this bill provides for an expedited regulatory process, so DEQ may move forward a little more quickly than they would under a full formal regulatory process. They do not need to have a regulatory advisory panel or a notice of intended regulatory action. However, they still have to go through a formal process where they create draft guidelines, present those to the State Water Conservation Board, which we think will happen at the winter or spring meeting this year, and then we'll continue to work through a public comment period in that process, which will probably take at least another year or so. So we anticipate this being roughly a 2-year process total. aligned with this, DEQ has received, working through the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program, a separate federal grant for a project of special merit under Section 309 NOAA funding to work with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and the Virginia Coastal Policy Center to assist in developing technical guidance related to this legislation. That effort was already underway before the legislation was finalized, but the two will go well together, and it will help DEQ in providing opportunities for additional stakeholder engagement as they work through developing and then finally getting board approval for their final guidelines. And with that, we will take your questions. Again, thank you for the opportunity to address the status of this legislation. And we are very serious about the opportunity to develop not only robust guidelines, but to receive considerable stakeholder input to developing those guidelines to help the Commonwealth move forward. Thank you.
Councilwoman McClellan.
Thank you, Ann. So the first question I had related to the Reggie funds and how is that reporting going to happen, and to whom? What is the decision basis, or to both in terms of the grant and the revolving loans, as well as the administrative elements? How will that, and by whom will those decisions be made, and will this group receive reports of that?
Ann, this is Russ Baxter.
Right,
if you'd like me to jump in, I'd be happy to.
Sure.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm Russ Baxter with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. I'd first like to thank you for giving me the reason to shave and put on a collared shirt this morning. Secondly, in response to the question, is that there are obviously a framework that is contained in the legislation that describes the activities for which these funds will be granted. DCR is given the responsibility, as the Admiral said, to set up those guidelines, and we're in the preliminary process of doing that. We expect to be not only reporting to you, but legions of interested stakeholders, local governments, planning district commissions, soil and water conservation districts, all of those political subdivisions of the state that are very much interested in these funds. Again, they are statewide. We've seen some of the worst flooding problems in Virginia, in Western Virginia and Southwest Virginia. So we're really trying to take a broad look at this. We obviously need to talk more with the financial folks at VRA regarding the split between what might be grants and what might be loans. When a local government takes on a loan and then decides to turn around and grant it to perhaps residents or community associations, they remain responsible for that loan. And so there are going to be some decisions that local governments would want to make. Obviously, people like grants more than they like loans, but grants use up the money a whole lot faster than a loan that is being repaid. So those decisions yet haven't been made. They're obviously on the table. The authorization is there to make those decisions within the statute, and we're in the process of thinking through those right now. Thank you.
Any other questions for Admiral Phillips?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. I know that the Reggie auctions typically take place every 3 months. Does anyone have any idea about the amount of revenue that the Commonwealth will be getting on an annual basis? I mean, so we have an idea of really what the impact of this is going to be. And if 45% of those funds are directed to flooding issues, I guess maybe this is for Mr. Baxter. How are those going to be evaluated? Is there going to be a cost sharing maybe with the municipality? And are there restrictions on those funds? For example, one of the things that Councilwoman McClellan talked about was we really need to get our precipitation data updated, because we're using, like you said, some of the worst flooding happens in the western part of the state, and primarily because, and we as engineers, we're using old data to design our stormwater systems. Could some of those Reggie funds be used to actually get the precipitation data updated for the Commonwealth?
There is language that's in the statute, excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman, in response to the question. there is language that's in the statute that allows us to use it for studies of state and regional significance. And so I don't see why that wouldn't possibly be one of the elements that we would be allowed. There is one of the differences between this fund and the current flood prevention fund that we administer now with VRA, that it's a much smaller, is there is a requirement for a 50% cost share. There is no such requirement for this new community flood preparedness fund. And so that's a little bit different than what we have. In terms of I think in your first question was how much money are we talking about? I think we don't know yet, but the estimates that we've been given is that on an annual basis, at least in the near term, could be upwards towards $30 million, which would mean somewhere in the range of possibly $12 to $15 million available for the Community Preparedness Fund. So that remains to be seen. I think the auction market, I'm not an expert in Reggie auction markets. And so I would leave that to the experts at DEQ to make those predictions. But at least we're planning for a fairly large scale, at least large in the terms of what we've done in the past, a program that would, again, do a variety of things from necessary studies, necessary planning to put localities in a position to use the money best, and then specific projects, whether it be retreat or elevation or other things in the coastal context that may be necessary. So I think all of those things are potentially on the table, given the broad nature of the statute. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman McClellan.
Just as a follow-up on that, so will recognizing that the first auctions, I believe, said that would be first quarter of 21. So we'll start
second quarter, but
okay,
hard to say. First or second quarter, yes.
So will this program and all these determinations, staffing, et cetera, be done in advance of the funding being received?
Yes, that's our plan. Is that we obviously can't put out a request for proposals when we don't know how much money we want to have to give. But we would plan to have all of that in place. We're already working on the budget side. We have flexibility that was wisely written into the statute that allows us to use a portion for administrative purposes, and a big grant fund takes some administration. You need folks dedicated to it. And we're working with the Secretary's office on how we would staff up for that, using the proceeds of the Reggie auction to pay for those positions. We don't want to use a lot for administration, but when you're starting to put out $10 to $15 million, you want to make sure that it is, these are funds that are a good look is taken and the oversight is robust on these funds. Thank you.
With all due respect, that $10 to $15 million is a lot of money. Spread statewide, not so much. I can tell you a relatively small project in my neighborhood in Norfolk would cost $50 million.
Yeah.
For flood.
No, and
so I'm very concerned about.
So I think it's also that this is year after year. It's not going to be based on, I apologize for calling it the whims of the General Assembly, but it's going to be a regular source of income. So there may be multi-year projects that we want to engage in. But I think we have to look at what are going to benefit the most people for the least cost. And that's why regional projects are specifically called out for in the statute, and a variety of other things that would tend you to think that direction.
Ann, did you want to add something?
Yes, Senator, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would add that building capacity is another need that we know exists across the Commonwealth, not just in coastal Virginia. Many localities who have the most need have the least ability to plan or prepare or even understand and prioritize what their needs are. So that is something else we have an opportunity to help with here, to help us move forward. But but both of your points are well taken with the amount of money. This is far more money than we've had up until now. We've had practically nothing. But when you consider it in the context of, say, a project like Chesterfield Heights, 110 million, one small community in the city of Norfolk. There are much larger needs over time, but this gives us a start to build that capacity, to start to set priorities, and to start to move forward, collecting the data that we've talked about, that you spoke of earlier, Councilwoman McClellan, so that we can put everybody on at least a level playing field and start to move forward.
Questions?
All right, Mr. Chairman. Hey, this is Keith.
Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Phillips, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
I'm not sure if this is necessarily a question or statement or how we can respond, but looking back at Senate Bill 776 and the protection of the wetlands and building living shorelines, and looking at the best available science, I want to ensure that we don't mix feelings, if that makes sense. Too often we base our decisions on feelings and not necessarily looking at the best available science or even looking at new science. And in particular, there are some things with living shorelines now that we can build them stronger, better, but it doesn't necessarily fit our current definition of a living shoreline. But when you look at it and feel it and touch it, it's a living shoreline. So how can we, move forward with what's best for the environment, to protect from flooding, but also remove our feelings when, and take those away, because those are going to get in our way in the future unless we look at things differently, if that makes sense.
So Delegate Hodges, that does make sense. And I would hazard a guess that you're talking about specific materials that can be used.
There's some different materials and different structures and some things that when you look at it and build it and touch it and feel it, it's a living shoreline. But yet they're saying it's not a living shoreline. So we want to make sure that, we're moving in the right direction and not necessarily basing our decisions on feelings and really get down to the nitty gritty and do what's best. And find cost-effective solutions to do it. So if we could just make sure that we're looking at it on both sides. So,
Commissioner Bowman, you have something to add?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and greetings to all. That's specifically, Delegate Hodges, while we are going through the motions, the exercise to ensure that all stakeholders are involved. As Admiral Phillips had indicated, we're enlisting the best resources that we have, the brilliant minds at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. This is not a whole lot unlike fishery management, because at times it's very easy to go down the path of what you think appears to be the right thing, but you have to keep your eye on the prize to ensure that the best science is utilized during the course of these decision-making processes. And that's the reason we're having this number of stakeholder meetings. So we fully understand at the commission where you're coming from. We deal with whether it's fishery management or this type of management day in and day out. And time again, I've always reminded the folks that our charge by virtue of the law is what it is, and that is to ensure that we utilize the best science available regardless of what our emotions tell us. And that's the way that we're going to continue down this path. So, sir, in all due respect, I want to ensure you that we understand our charge by virtue of the statute that's before us, and we will ensure that emotion, although sometimes important to the overall scheme of things, will not play a part in the decision-making process as we go forward to developing the regulations and guidelines that we will be dealing with as a product of all these exercises. So I just wanted to throw that out to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Brian? No other questions? Y'all are a quiet group this morning.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Delegate Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering when I know in the next couple of weeks there's going to be a master plan. I just was hoping to get a little bit more information, and hopefully we can get a lot more information then. But I was just wanting to know if there was any insight from Admiral Phillips.
So I mentioned this briefly in the presentation, but we are working on a master plan framework, which is actually written, drafted, and in policy for review. When it will be released is still to be determined, but that is going to help us structure a number of things as far as how we will move forward as a Commonwealth and the kinds of actions and processes we want to put in place, many of which you've heard discussed today to some extent. So it's coming. And I think we're a lot farther along thanks to the legislation that many of you helped pass and write over the last year or so into making this a reality and actually moving forward as a state towards developing a full plan and process.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman McClellan.
With regard to that and the special session that I know all of the delegates and senators are enjoying so much right now, and I assume you're going to be talking about the budget at some point. Is there not an item within the budget in the special session that specifically deals with the financing of consultants to help with a future evolution of that master plan? And could we talk about that today?
It's my understanding there is such an item. Ann?
There is a request to use a line of credit from the Department of Conservation and Recreation to begin to fund such a master plan.
Which would
Russ, I don't know if you want to add more about that or not.
Which would then be repaid by Reggie?
Yes, the intent over time is that it would be repaid through the Reggie funds.
Rusty?
I don't have anything to add. That's Admiral's absolutely accurate.
How much money are we talking about?
Do you want to say well, the line of credit is $4 million. That doesn't mean I'm spending $4 million, and I'm certainly not spending it all at once. And of course, I have to have a process by which I'm doing that. I can't just spend it. So, but it would allow us access to a funding stream that we have not had access to up until now. And if we don't get it passed, we still don't have access to it. So.
Mr. Chairman, if you look at what other states have done, like Texas and Louisiana and Florida, the master plan could take 2 years to complete, and it could cost anywhere from $4 to $6 million. That's what other states have spent. And the other comment that I want to make about the Reggie funds is, it sounds like $12 million a year is a lot of money, but it really isn't. To Councilwoman McClellan's point, one project in Norfolk cost $100 million, and the city of Virginia Beach, with the study that they just completed, they've identified projects that are in the billions. So, I don't want anybody to really think that the Reggie funds are the panacea that's going to help us. It is going to help, but we have to find some other sources of funding to be able to help municipalities deal with some of these issues.
Anybody else?
To Chris's point, I would, and Russ, you mentioned, by the way, your collar looks very nice this morning, your collared shirt.
Fun in weeks.
You mentioned that regionalism or regional projects would be given a priority, which I think is a great point, because they should be watershed based. What we do in Norfolk is going to affect what happens in Virginia Beach, et cetera, et cetera. The problem that we are finding here is that we have our own planning departments. And of course, we have more capacity than some of the smaller municipalities around the Commonwealth, but we don't have any regional planning dollars to create those regional projects. And so if you have a limited amount of funding within Reggie, capacity building at the regional level would be it seems to me, an area where you should prioritize, because you could actually then at least get those shovel-ready projects that are regionally based with regional planning dollars, much like what we do for transportation, right? We have regional transportation dollars from the federal and state funding streams. We don't have that for flooding projects. And so if we have limited funds, if we could prioritize those for regional planning, I think that would be very helpful.
And I would say, Mr. Chairman, in response to Councilwoman McClellan's comments. That's exactly, I mean, I don't want to make any promises exact now because we haven't finalized the guidelines and we'll be going through a process, but the statute specifically talks about using planning district commissions and other regional entities. That's going to make a lot of sense. And I get it. This is a lot of money for us because we've never seen this kind of money, but it's not a lot of money in terms of the overall issues that we face. And I think we're going to be looking at not only using the state share, but we get money from FEMA and other sources, federal funds. Obviously, localities have capital budgets as well. And I think it's going to be the mix of those funds and the most effective mix of those funds that we're going to look at moving forward.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? All right. Hobie, I see next on the agenda is upcoming meeting dates. Do we have to pull the trigger on anything with those, or?
No, sir. We can poll at a later date if you'd like, or.
Yeah, that's probably best, obviously. We've got October, November, December, and then we have a pre-session meeting in January. So we'll be on the lookout for a poll to see about availability on that. And as I said, I certainly want to explore the option of getting back to a real meeting as soon as we can. And it seems to me that those House committee rooms in the Pocahontas building are, for a committee this size, you can certainly distance in there. And but we'll discuss all that and see what we can come up with, or something on a regional basis. Perhaps we can find an appropriate, large enough facility to handle that with CDC guidelines. But
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was just wondering, so would the goal be, and I know this committee is newly new members and working towards some goals, but would it be appropriate to think towards the 2021 session and be thinking about legislation that we would want to develop that would we could potentially endorse and work on for the 2021 session? Would that be a good goal to have in mind for the committee?
Well, Delegate Fett, we always do that. And towards our last meeting, we will have a little roundup about, as we glean more information, more ideas from these meetings, we always work towards developing a legislative agenda. And oftentimes we actually endorse legislative proposals from our members on behalf of the committee, so we can represent going forward through the process that has been endorsed, considered by, and endorsed by our committee. So yes, absolutely, that's what we'll be doing, and that's one of our primary functions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify for new members as well.
Sure, absolutely. Delegate King.
Yeah, so the House Joint Resolution 102, which is the most recent version that re-upped this committee, which was passed earlier this year, has a deadline of, I'll just read the Joint Subcommittee shall complete its meetings for the first year by November 30th of 2020 and the second year by November 20th of 2021. And then the chairman shall submit to the Division of Legislative Services an executive summary. So you could certainly submit the summaries of our findings or recommendations after that date, but I think under the resolution, our last meeting has to be by November 30th, which gives us about a month and a half, 2 months for us to meet.
Right.
And you might recall, Mr. Chair, we had one meeting in January, so this would be our second meeting of the calendar year, and there is a limit of 4 meetings this year as far as that resolution is concerned. So we can have up to 2 more meetings between now and November 30th.
Right.
Mr. Chair, are there any other legislative ideas that the committee has been considering for the upcoming session?
Not as of yet. None that I can comment on at this point. Anybody else? Keith? When they say legislation, I always look to you. You're mute. You're mute. Keith, you're mute.
My finger's not working right. There we go. Yeah, I'm working on some things, but nothing ready for prime time to bring before the committee yet. But typically at that last meeting, we'll all give a kind of a overview of our proposals. We may or may not have draft legislation at that time. If we do, we'll share it with the subcommittee. If not, we'll discuss the concept. And sometimes we vote to endorse, and sometimes we just listen.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we had a recommendation, what's the protocol for getting that to whom for the entire committee to consider?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, a lot of times what I think is helpful is if we make that particular item an agenda item for one of our meetings, so that we can actually have someone present whatever the idea might be or along those lines, and that's helpful to us. And this agenda is wide open. So, I mean, you know, we love to have ideas about presenters, presentations, ideas that we need to discuss. So don't be shy about communicating those with us.
Is there a committee liaison? I mean, I know I shouldn't be sending things to necessarily you, Mr. Chairman, but
actually, right now, and she's going to kill me for saying this, but the committee liaison probably is Jesse, my legislative aide. So you can funnel your stuff through her.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Ranson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request the PowerPoints today, if they could be sent over.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get them out to you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Fowler.
For the next meeting, could I go ahead and request that smart scale funding be included so that we could get an overview and potentially support flooding being added to that to smart scale?
Oh, well, sure, absolutely. We'll put that down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Anybody else?
So,
all right, folks.
And there was one question that was asked about potential legislation from Councilwoman McClellan, and I do know that in years past the disclosure has been a piece of legislation that has been brought forward, and I think it even originated from this subcommittee, and I'm assuming that will be something that someone will introduce in the 2021 session, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, and we wouldn't, at this early date, nobody would know who would. I mean, I think Delegate Fowler, I think, has carried it in the past. But, you know, we'll work towards that as we get into deeper into the fall and closer to the legislative session. Anybody else? All right, folks, thank you for joining us today. Look forward to working with you. We've got good work to do and important work to do. So everybody stay safe and healthy until we can hopefully get back to normal. So with that, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.